What if you could build a Star Wars comic collection that captured the entire history of the galaxy far, far away? Not just random issues, but the books that truly shaped the franchise. The comics that introduced legendary characters, expanded the universe, and became cornerstones of Star Wars collecting. Star Wars comics have been published for nearly 50 years, and during that time, certain issues have become essential for collectors. These are the comics that represent turning points in the galaxy's mythology, stories that help build the universe beyond the films. Today, we're looking at 10 Star Wars comics that every collector should consider owning. These books represent major milestones in the history of Star Wars storytelling. From the original Marvel series that began in the late 1970s, to modern issues that introduced characters who are now central to the franchise. Some of these comics are important because they feature the first appearances of beloved characters. Others helped expand the galaxy's timeline into new eras and stories. Together, they form a kind of foundation for anyone interested in collecting Star Wars comics. The first comic that belongs in almost every Star Wars collection is Star Wars #1 from 1977. This issue represents the beginning of the original Marvel comic series that launched alongside the first Star Wars film. One of the most interesting things about this comic is that Marvel released it before the movie became the global phenomenon it is today. At the time, the company took a gamble on adapting a science fiction film that had not yet proven itself. Another key reason this book matters is its place in comic history. The success of the Star Wars series helped Marvel regain financial stability during a difficult time in the industry. A third reason collectors pursue this issue is nostalgia. Finally, high-grade copies of this book have become major collectibles because they represent the beginning of decades of Star Wars storytelling in comics. The second comic collectors often seek is Star Wars #42 from the original Marvel run. This issue is widely known because it features one of the earliest comic appearances of Boba Fett. Over time, Boba Fett became one of the most recognizable bounty hunters in science fiction. One reason collectors pursue this issue is the character's enduring popularity. Boba Fett has appeared in films, television series, and novels across multiple generations of Star Wars storytelling. Another factor is the historical importance of the early Marvel series itself. These comics helped build the Star Wars universe at a time when the films alone could not provide enough content for fans. The third comic worth owning is Star Wars, Heir to the Empire #1. This issue adapts the famous novel that introduced Grand Admiral Thrawn. Thrawn quickly became one of the most respected villains in the Star Wars universe. One key reason collectors value this comic is the character's growing influence across different forms of media. Thrawn originally appeared in novels, but eventually transitioned into animated series and live-action storytelling. Another reason this issue matters is historical significance. The Heir to the Empire storyline helped revive interest in Star Wars during the early 1990s when no new films were being produced. Finally, Thrawn's continued presence in modern Star Wars media keeps this comic relevant to collectors. The fourth comic that deserves attention is Tales of the Jedi #1. This issue explores the ancient history of the Jedi and Sith thousands of years before the Skywalker saga. One of the most fascinating aspects of this comic is the way it expands the mythology of the Force. Instead of focusing on familiar characters from the films, it introduces readers to a completely different era in the Star Wars timeline. Another reason collectors appreciate this issue is the world building it introduced. The Tales of the Jedi series established the idea that the galaxy has a long and complex history stretching far beyond the events of the movies. A third point is the continued fascination fans have with ancient Jedi lore. The fifth comic collectors often recommend is Knights of the Old Republic #1. This series takes place during one of the most beloved periods in Star Wars history. One reason collectors value this comic is its connection to the Knights of the Old Republic video games, which remain extremely popular among fans. Another factor is the depth of storytelling within this era of the galaxy. The Old Republic timeline explores conflicts between the Jedi and Sith on a massive scale. A third reason collectors pursue this issue is the possibility that stories from this era could eventually appear in film or television adaptations. The sixth comic that has become increasingly important to collectors is Darth Vader #3 from the 2015 Marvel series. This issue introduced Dr. Aphra, a character who quickly became one of the most popular additions to the modern Star Wars canon. One reason collectors want this comic is Aphra's unique personality. She is not a traditional hero or villain, which makes her unpredictable and interesting. Another factor is character growth. Aphra went on to headline her own comic series, something relatively rare for new characters in the Star Wars universe. A third point is the possibility that she could eventually appear in live-action stories. The seventh comic that belongs in many collections is Kanan, The Last Padawan, #1. This issue explores the early life of Kanan Jarrus from the Star Wars Rebels animated series. One reason collectors appreciate this comic is its connection to the timeline between the prequel and original trilogies. Another factor is the emotional depth of the character's story. Kanan is one of the few Jedi survivors of Order 66, and his experiences shape the events of the Rebels series. A third reason collectors seek this comic is the growing influence of animated characters within live-action Star Wars storytelling. The eighth comic that many collectors consider essential is Darth Vader #1 from the 2017 Marvel series. This story explores the early days of Darth Vader after the events of Revenge of the Sith. One key reason this comic matters is its exploration of Vader's transformation from Anakin Skywalker into the Dark Lord of the Sith. Another factor is the character's enduring popularity. Darth Vader remains one of the most iconic villains in cinematic history. A third point is the strong storytelling and artwork that help make this series one of the most respected modern Star Wars comics. The ninth comic that collectors often revisit is Dark Empire #1. This series represents one of the most ambitious Star Wars comic storylines from the expanded universe era. The story explores the return of Emperor Palpatine through cloning technology. One reason collectors find this comic fascinating is its bold approach to expanding the mythology of the galaxy. Another factor is historical importance. The Dark Empire series was one of the earliest major Star Wars comic projects produced after the original film trilogy. A third reason collectors seek it out is nostalgia among fans who grew up reading expanded universe stories. The 10th comic worth owning is Star Wars #1 from the 2015 Marvel relaunch. This issue marked Marvel's return to publishing Star Wars comics after years of the license being held by another publisher. One reason collectors value this book is its historical significance. It represents the beginning of a new era of Star Wars comics under Marvel. Another factor is the excitement surrounding the franchise at the time, especially with new films entering production. A third point is the wide variety of variant covers that made the issue a major event for collectors. When looking at these 10 comics together, several patterns emerge. Many of them represent the first appearances of characters who later became major figures in the Star Wars universe. Another interesting aspect of Star Wars comics is the way they connect different forms of media. Characters introduced in comics sometimes appear later in novels, animation, or live-action television. When that happens, collectors often return to the original comic issues that introduce those characters or ideas. Of course, every collector approaches Star Wars comics differently. Some focus on first appearances of important characters. Others concentrate on stories that expand the mythology of the Force or explore different eras of the galaxy. The beauty of Star Wars collecting is that the universe is large enough to support many different approaches. Ultimately, the most important reason these comics matter is the imagination behind them. Each issue represents a moment when creators expanded the Star Wars galaxy with new characters, ideas, and adventures. Those moments become pieces of history that collectors treasure. If you enjoy exploring the world of Star Wars comics and the stories behind them, consider subscribing and joining the conversation. Let me know in the comments which Star Wars comics you believe every collector should own. The galaxy is full of incredible stories, and sometimes the most exciting discoveries are waiting inside the pages of a comic book.